During the early 1980s, the punk underground scene would emerge in America.
If efficiency in progress is ours once more.
Leaving the punk scene in a state which was never seen before at the time, with bands becoming fed up with the lack of variation and dullness of what the punk scene would consist of at the time. Seeing how everybody wanted to be the next Ramones, Sex Pistols, and even The Clash didn't sit well in the minds of bands. To see the genre of punk slowly giving birth to commercial stars and becoming popularized by the media instead of following its original ideology of rejecting mainstream culture and the overall desire of it. To go against this monopoly, bands will increase the aggression of their production and lyrics, often yelling and screaming with the addition of breakdowns and tempo shifts, making the general sound structure feel heavier and faster than before. While keeping the old elements that made punk music what it is, the do-it-yourself, or better known as DIY style, was still in effect alongside its political statements seen in some lyrics and the main factor of punk music that was anti-establishment. This new approach of punk would gain quite the underground audience, mainly from teens who've grown bored of the mainstream sound of glam rock, hard rock, and even new wave bands like Van Halen, AC/DC, and the Talking Heads. To the fans, it was a fresh new sound, a sound that wasn't filled with people who wanted to make music only for the purpose of radio plays. This type of individualism and aggression gave people a chance to get away from what the media portrays how bands and artists were on a daily basis. But bands weren't finished with evolving the sound of hardcore punk, yet giving birth to another subgenre in the middle of the hardcore punk scene in the name of post-hardcore. Basically taking the sound of hardcore punk but extending it beyond a straightforward approach, keeping its roots and adding more depth and identity to it. Whether it be noise rock elements like using highly distorted riffs that sound like chainsaws, or using math rock to captivate you into embracing the atmosphere and the sound even more. But the band that I'm going to be talking about today does not use the likes of noise rock, math rock, art rock, or even indie rock to still become a sensation in the world of post-hardcore, stamping their name into the scene's history and creating one of the most groundbreaking post-hardcore albums of all time. The name of this band is At the Drive-In, and they would change the post-hardcore scene forever, while still being unknown by many people. Cedric Glixler Zavala, born in Redwood City, California, was brought into this world by his Mexican-American mother, Rosa Zavala, and his father, Dennis Blixler Marquez, who was born to a white father with some German ancestry. In the 1990s, Cedric would start to pick up some drumsticks and start to take up playing drums and being a vocalist for a small band called Foss in El Paso, Texas. During this time, Cedric will also meet his long-term music partner and close friend during a practice session with his future bandmate, Paul Hinojos, Omar Rodriguez Lopez, who was born in Puerto Rico and grew up in El Paso, Texas, and was also involved in the underground hardcore scene in the area at the time with his own band called Startled Calf. Seeing how tight-knit the El Paso music scene was, being filled with local bands playing in the same venues gave the two a strong bond that would later translate to their musical ideas and vision. After Omar broke up with Startled Calf, Omar would be left lost in life, not having a high school degree due to him dropping out of school at the age of 17.
This made it hard for him to do really anything outside of music, which would lead to him having to leave El Paso to hitchhike, where he would become addicted to opiates during his adventure. It seemed like everything was going on a downhill spiral with Omar until he got in touch with Cedric somehow, and he suggested that he should come back to El Paso. Taking his advice, Omar would be able to return with the help of Cedric, and the two will become united again and formed a band at the drive-in, with Cedric being the vocalist, Omar being on bass, and being the backup vocalist after getting his life together. Adam and Potter on guitar, and Jim Ward on guitar, and Ryan Sauber on drums. In 1996, this lineup would create Acrobatic Tenement. After landing a record deal with Flipside Records. The album was based on the life and suicide of Julio Venegas, a close friend of Cedric and Omar. This story would be expanded on later on in their careers with the Mars Vulture. In the name of The Lost in the Comatorium, a concept album based on the tragic tale. Acrobatic Tenement wouldn't see much buzz from critics nor charts, not even making any significant commercial impact, and with not many critics talking about it. But the ones that did talk about it had positive things to say about the band. The album was seen as a normal post-hardcore album and was a flop in terms of what was to come later on. But it did showcase the early sound of At the Drive-In, in which they would evolve on later on, with this album being more raw and unpolished compared to the others, while also showing the insane energy that they would keep with the band's career down the line. This album also showed the side of post-hardcore that wasn't really touched on at the time. And with that being fusing it with emo elements, with Cedric writing about personal and social themes while delivering them with emotional intensity from the vocal style of being loud and yelling at times.
Watch you clap your hands by your stage. The media rules you just another page in the book that your friend signed yesterday. And when I told you not to bother to holler, your telephone's the one that helped me wrap the cord around your neck. You know you're beautiful when you're dead.
21 years down the line, the band would come out with their second album, In Casino Out, with the band experimenting with the production of this album, making it with the same raw feel from the first album while adding more energy to captivate the sound from their live shows. This made the band record the album in a live studio with minimum overdubs. Seeing how the band was more focused on the approach of recording and production, the album would become critically acclaimed, with most reviews being positive, becoming more known in a wider scale when it comes to critics and even their audience, also being well received in the underground scene. Even though it didn't receive any commercial success, it was clear to the band what their audience was looking for, and later on foreshadowing their sound on their next project. So this type of mindset would lead to their magnum opus. And then 2 years later, they would release their third studio album, Relationship of Command. Being recorded at Indigo Ranch Studios, the band had time to work with renowned producer Ross Robinson, who worked with bands such as Korn, Slipknot, and Limp Bizkit, which was a perfect match for what the band was looking for in terms of their energetic style. Robinson will help the band captivate its previous sound from their last album, but was able to make it more aggressive and emotional while still sounding raw. With the addition of a new engineer, Andy Wallace, the album was mixed extremely well, touching up on the production and making it feel complete and put together. Alongside the production, this album features some of the best performances the band has put, with Cedric taking a melodic approach at times while screaming next second. This approach made the lyrics more impactful, with Cedric often addressing themes of political and social unrest, personal struggles, existential angst, and even death. Upon its release, the album garnered overnight success from critics who labeled it as groundbreaking work in the post-hardcore scene, with the ratings being the highest the band has ever received on Rate Your Music and Album of the Year from users and critics. And the band will also gain commercial success from their hit One Armed Scissor. Leading people to check out more from the band in the genre of post-hardcore. This act of support from people around the world wasn't really seen around the time of post-hardcore during the late 1990s and the early 2000s. Bands were so fixated on the common genre mixtures like noise rock and math rock, no band really thought of adding emo elements to their sound. Seeing how popular emo has become at the time, At the Drive-In brung light to using some emo elements to their vocals but still keeping the hardcore sound. Alongside bands like Glassjaw and The Used would also pioneer this sound. Although punks hated mainstream culture, this emo side of post-hardcore would change that and see mainstream success, while spreading the genre of hardcore towards people who have never experienced it before. Seeing the genre evolve gave the fans a sensational feeling, learning now that it doesn't matter anymore if it was mainstream or not. It resonated with their mindset and their image, made them feel more comfortable by listening to bands like At the Drive-In. The sound of At the Drive-In would later influence many hardcore bands, and the relationship of Command is now seen as a monumental piece in the hardcore scene, later furthering the sound of screamo and the overall sound of emo. And it's safe to say that without that album, a lot of post-hardcore would not have the same energy seen in today's hardcore music or just punk music in general. And that's the story of At the Drive-In and how they became an overnight success in the underground scene. Hope you enjoyed the video as much as I did, since Cedric and Omar are both my favorite artists. I thought it would be cool to make a video on them, since most people don't even know who these two are. Let me know if you guys want to see a video on the Mars Vulture in the future, and see you next time in the new video.